In the autumn of 1992, a construction crew widening a freeway south of San Diego drove their machines into the earth and struck something they were never supposed to find. It didn't look like much. A scatter of broken bone in the dirt, a few gray stones sitting in soft sand where stones had no business being. The kind of thing a bulldozer operator notices for half a second and forgets about by lunch. But one man on that site stopped the machines. And what his team pulled out of the ground over the next 5 months didn't just add a chapter to the story of America. It detonated the entire book. Because when those bones were finally tested, not with guesswork, but with radioactive elements that decay at a fixed, measurable rate, the number that came back wasn't 13,000 years. It wasn't 20,000. It was 130,000 years old. A date so impossible that, if it is right, everything you were ever taught about who reached this continent first and when is wrong. Not slightly wrong, catastrophically wrong. Wrong by more than 100,000 years. Wrong by so much that it would place someone butchering an animal on a California hillside tens of thousands of years before our own species is even thought to have walked out of Africa. This is that story. And it is only the beginning. For most of the last century, the story of the first Americans wasn't a theory, it was the law. The version taught in every classroom, repeated in every textbook, and defended at every academic conference went like this. The first people crossed a land bridge from Siberia into Alaska near the end of the last ice age, roughly 13,000 years ago. They carried a distinctive stone spear point, first identified near the town of Clovis, New Mexico, and so they were given a name, the Clovis people. They were the first, full stop. To suggest otherwise was professional suicide. In the words of one archaeologist, standing up and claiming someone had arrived before the Clovis people was tantamount to announcing you had just seen Elvis walk out of a Burger King. It wasn't just skepticism, it was ridicule. Organized, institutional, career-ending ridicule. Careers were built on the Clovis-first model. Careers were also destroyed by challenging it. For 50 years, if your excavation turned up evidence pointing to something older, the safest thing you could do for your future was reinterpret the evidence, pack up your tools, and dig somewhere less dangerous. That is the wall the San Diego freeway was about to run straight into. In November of 1992, the state of California was expanding State Route 54 in San Diego County. A paleontologist named Richard Cerutti was on site, monitoring the earth moving, watching for fossils, when the machinery exposed a patch of broken bone in the dirt. The site would eventually carry his name, the Cerutti Mastodon Site. Over the next 5 months, a team from the San Diego Natural History Museum, led by paleontologist Thomas Desmarais, carefully excavated what remained of a single American mastodon, a heavy-limbed relative of the elephant that once roamed the continent in enormous numbers. But this was no ordinary bone bed, and the deeper they dug, the stranger it got. The mastodon's bones had been broken in a very particular way. Its heavy limb bones were shattered while still fresh, snapped with the kind of spiral fractures you only get when a heavy stone strikes living bone. The same technique ancient people used across the world to crack bones open and get at the rich marrow inside. 2 of its massive femur heads had been laid side by side, one facing up, one facing down, not scattered by time, placed. And surrounding them, 5 large stones that had no business being in that soft sediment. Stones marked with the unmistakable wear of hammers and anvils. The team didn't go looking for a revolution. They went looking for an age. When geologists tested the mastodon bones using uranium and thorium, elements that decay at a known, steady, unforgiving rate, they were expecting the usual range. Something comfortably within the accepted human timeline. Something that wouldn't cause problems. Instead, the result came back at roughly 130,000 years. Sit with that for a moment. 100,000 years before the Clovis people. Tens of thousands of years before Homo sapiens is thought to have left Africa. If modern humans weren't even on this side of the planet yet, then who knelt in that San Diego dirt and broke open that mastodon? The team knew exactly how explosive that question was, and they were careful with it. When they published their findings in the journal Nature in 2017, they did not claim these were modern humans. They couldn't. Instead, they wrote with enormous caution that the site had been created by an unidentified species of Homo, some earlier member of the human family. A cousin we have not yet imagined, walking the shores of North America 100,000 years too early. The reaction from the scientific community was swift, and it was brutal. Extraordinary claims, they said, require extraordinary evidence, and broken bones beside rounded rocks did not come close. Travel 3,000 miles north of that San Diego freeway into the frozen heart of the Yukon, and you reach a place called the Bluefish Caves. They are not grand. 3 small hollows carved into a limestone ridge, none of them larger than a modest room, looking out over the Bluefish River in the far northwest corner of Canada. This is a region scientists call Beringia. During the last ice age, when so much of the planet's water was locked up in glaciers, the sea level dropped, and Beringia became a vast, cold, grassy land bridge connecting Asia to the Americas. If people walked into the New World, they walked through here. This was the front door of the entire continent. Between 1977 and 1987, an archaeologist named Jacques Cinq-Mars excavated these caves. Among tens of thousands of animal bones, horses, caribou, mammoths, he believed he could see the unmistakable marks of human hands, cut marks, butchery. And when he dated some of those bones, the numbers reached back as far as 30,000 years. He said so publicly. And for that, he was punished. His findings weren't debated so much as brushed aside. His excavation became a cautionary tale older archaeologists told younger ones. He grew bitter, convinced the establishment had refused to even look at his evidence. Not disprove it, just refuse to look. High in the arid mountains of northern Zacatecas, Mexico, there is a cave so remote and so difficult to reach that almost no one would go there without a very good reason. It is called Chiquihuite. It sits nearly 3,000 meters above sea level, a dark chamber tucked beneath a limestone cliff, and in 2020, it produced a claim that made headlines around the world. An archaeologist named Cyprian Ardelin had been digging inside that cave for years. Deep in its floor, sealed beneath layers of hardened mud and rubble, his team recovered nearly 2,000 pieces of broken limestone. To Ardelin, these were not random rocks. They were tools. Flakes, blades, points, and cores shaped by human hands. And the layers holding them were old. Very old. When his team published in the journal Nature, the dates were staggering. The oldest layers reached back 31 to 33,000 years. The clearest evidence of occupation clustered around 26,500 years ago. If Ardelin was right, humans had been sheltering in this high mountain cave more than 10,000 years before Clovis, during the very coldest and harshest depths of the last ice age. But the cave contained no human bones, no human DNA, no hearths firmly tied to people. The entire case rested on the stones themselves. And that is where things got complicated. Here is where you need to learn a word, because it is going to follow us through every site that remains in this story. That word is geofact. A geofact is a stone that looks exactly like a tool, but was never touched by a human hand. It is broken and flaked by nature alone, by rock falling from a cave ceiling, by stones tumbling down a cliff face, by the slow grinding pressure of debris over thousands of years. Nature, it turns out, is a convincing forger. Critics applied that word to Chiquihuite immediately. A team led by respected archaeologists Jim Chatters and Ben Potter argued the cave sat beneath a cliff prone to rockfall, precisely the kind of environment that mass produces convincing fakes. They pointed out the stones showed no consistent, patterned flaking, the fingerprint of deliberate human craft. And they raised a deeper objection. If people were truly in this cave 26,000 years ago, humans were in the Americas before the genetic split separating Native Americans from their East Asian ancestors even occurred. The entire human family tree would need to be redrawn. Ardelin fired back fiercely, defending his strongest tools one by one, pointing to wear and intentional shaping no falling rock could explain. To this day, no one knows for certain. Chiquihuite sits in scientific limbo, too well documented to ignore, too thin on hard proof to command belief. If the first Americans are in your ancestry, and for a lot of you watching, head over to the OriginDNA website. I have a 3-volume PDF guide bundle that shows you exactly how to read your raw data and maximize your ancestry or 23andMe results. Link is in the description. But don't go yet. The last part of this video is the most important. Along the banks of the Savannah River in Allendale County, South Carolina, there is a place where the ground is rich with stone. For thousands of years, ancient people came here to harvest chert, a hard flint-like rock perfect for making sharp tools. The site is called Topper, named for the local man who first led archaeologists to it. And the man who would make Topper famous and then infamous was an archaeologist named Albert Goodyear. Here is what makes Goodyear's story different from the others. He was not a rebel. When he began serious excavations in the 1980s, Topper was a good, solid, respectable site. By the late 1990s, his team had documented a clear Clovis presence, making it one of the most important early sites in the American Southeast. And Goodyear himself was a believer in the standard story. He did not expect to find anything older than Clovis. He saw little reason to dig deeper. Then, in 1998, he decided to break the rule anyway. He dug below the Clovis layer, the floor most archaeologists treated as the literal bottom of human history in America. And he did not hit empty, sterile ground. He found stone tools, small scrapers, blades, and flakes sitting in soil that dated to around 16,000 years, thousands of years before Clovis. That alone was enough to make him a controversial figure overnight. But Goodyear was not finished. In 2004, acting on what he openly called a hunch, he pushed nearly 4 meters deeper into the ancient river terrace. And there, buried in the sand, he found more chipped stone, and beside it, a dark stain in the soil, the carbonized remains of ancient burned plants, possibly a campfire. When that charcoal was sent for radiocarbon dating, 2 results came back that stunned him. Roughly 50,300 years. And one older still, past 51,700. 50,000 years in South Carolina, long before the last ice age even reached its peak. If the stones beside that charcoal were tools, then humans had walked this riverbank an astonishing 37,000 years before Clovis. Goodyear even had a star piece, a large chunk of worked chert he affectionately nicknamed Big Red, which he was convinced showed clear, repeated strikes from a human hand. But this time, the doubt struck at the very method itself. 50,000 years is right at the outer edge of what radiocarbon dating can even measure. Push past that limit, and a sample is effectively radiocarbon dead. The reading becomes deeply, dangerously unreliable. Critics argued the dark stain might not be a campfire at all, but the residue of a natural wildfire, and the stones drew the same one-word verdict from skeptics: geofacts. Topper became something stranger than proven or disproven, a permanent question mark planted deep in the American earth. To understand this next story, you have to understand the man at the center of it, because he was not a crank. He was not an outsider desperate for attention. He was one of the most celebrated scientists of the 20th century. His name was Louis Leakey. Along with his wife Mary, Leakey had transformed our entire understanding of human origins in Africa, unearthing fossils that pushed the human story back millions of years and helped prove that humanity itself was born on the African continent. When Louis Leakey spoke about ancient humans, the world listened. A California archaeologist named Ruth D. Simpson brought Leakey some curious stones from the Mojave Desert, from a place called the Calico Hills. To Simpson, they looked like ancient scrapers, and Leakey was intrigued for a reason entirely his own. He had long been convinced that the sheer number and variety of native languages across the Americas could not possibly have developed in a mere 12,000 years. It felt too compressed, too fast. He believed people had been here far longer, and that no one had simply dug deep enough to prove it. In 1963, with funding from the National Geographic Society, he launched excavations at what became the Calico Early Man Site. His team recovered thousands of broken stones, interpreted as tools. Dating put the deposits at roughly 200,000 years. The scientific community recoiled. No human remains were ever found at Calico, not a single bone. The geologist Vance Haynes visited the site and delivered a verdict that echoed through the field. The stones were geofacts, he said, fractured by the violent tumbling of an ancient river and debris flow that had torn through the Calico Hills long before any human could have stood there. Nature had made them, not people. Then came the most painful blow of all. From inside Leakey's own family, his wife Mary, a brilliant scientist in her own right, did not share his faith in Calico. She wrote with real anguish that his involvement with the site had cost her some of her academic respect for him. She called the Calico excavations catastrophic to his professional reputation. The woman who had worked beside him for decades, who understood better than anyone what genuine evidence looked like, looked at Calico and saw a mistake. Louis Leakey never let go. He kept visiting the site several times a year, defending it until his death in 1972. So, what was Calico? Evidence of a lost human timeline erased from every textbook? Or the great blind spot of a great man who wanted so badly to find deep human roots in America that he saw tools where there were only rocks? To this day, the vast majority of scientists say the stones are natural, and Calico is not even the most extreme claim on this list. That title belongs in the highlands of central Mexico, in a basin near the city of Puebla, at a site whose dates are so staggering they make everything before them look almost cautious. Its name is Hueyatlaco, and more than 60 years after it was found, it remains perhaps the single most contested archaeological site in all the Americas. The story begins in the early 1960s. A Mexican scholar named Juan Armenta Camacho and a young Harvard-trained archaeologist named Cynthia Irwin Williams began excavating a landscape littered with the fossilized bones of Ice Age giants. Mammoths, mastodons, camels, dire wolves, ground sloths. It looked like a kill site, and the tools found alongside those bones were not crude, they were sophisticated. Finely flaked double-edged blades, elegant projectile points made from stone carried in from far away. The work of skilled, experienced hands. The trouble was the age. The site had no good carbon to test. So a geologist named Virginia Steen McIntyre was brought in to date the volcanic ash layers. Working with colleagues, she applied multiple independent methods. And the numbers that came back did not just push the timeline. They demolished it. The dates centered around 250,000 years. Some methods suggested an even greater age still. Nobody was prepared for that. What happened next became a legend in its own right. Cynthia Irwin Williams, the lead archaeologist, was horrified by the extreme dates and publicly called them irresponsible. The geologists who produced them refused to back down, and Virginia Steen McIntyre found that defending her own data came at a terrible cost. She has said that speaking up about Hueyatlaco damaged her career, that the results were buried, and that the scientific establishment simply refused to grapple with what the dating showed. Her supporters describe it as suppression, evidence too dangerous to publish. Skeptics offer a calmer explanation. The dating methods of the 1960s and 70s were young and imperfect, reworked sediment, in which ancient volcanic material gets mixed with younger layers, can produce wildly inflated ages. There are no confirmed sites anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere remotely this old, and no fossils of the ancient humans who would have made these tools. The dates, they argue, are not a conspiracy. They are simply wrong. And yet the tools are real. No one disputes that human hands shaped those beautiful blades and points. No one disputes they were found among the bones of Ice Age beasts. The only question, the same question that has followed us through every single site in this story, is when. Hueyatlaco has never been solved. It sits in the record like a locked door, and no one has ever found the key. So, where does all of this leave us? 6 sites: a San Diego freeway, a frozen Yukon cave, a mountaintop in Mexico, a riverbank in South Carolina, a desert in California, a basin full of Ice Age bones. 6 times someone stood over broken stone in ancient earth and dared to say the same forbidden sentence. We were here far earlier than you think. And 6 times the scientific world answered with doubt, with skepticism, and with that one unforgiving word: geofact. But while the archaeologists spent decades locked in their arguments, the ground itself never stopped talking. In a dried lake bed at White Sands, New Mexico, researchers found footprints. Not tools that might be geofacts, not charcoal that might be a wildfire, not a stone somebody wanted to see as a scraper. Human footprints pressed into ancient mud and preserved for thousands of centuries. Adults and children walking the shoreline of a long-vanished lake. One person tracked across the flats following a giant ground sloth. You cannot argue that a footprint is a geofact. Dated first by seeds and pollen found in the surrounding layers. Then, when critics challenged those results, by grains of quartz, and finally by ancient mud tested in 2 separate independent laboratories, every method agreed. The footprints were made between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago, during the frozen peak of the last ice age. The exact window the textbooks insisted the Americas were empty. The first Americans were here far longer than we were ever taught. And somewhere out there, the next footprint is already waiting.
Thanks for watching. Before you head out, don't let your DNA profile just sit there collecting digital dust. Tap the link in the description to download your ebook and finally make sense of it all tonight.